Good morning, this is Judy with Artistic Artifacts. We're located in Alexandria, Virginia, and on the web at artisticartifacts.com. I hope everybody's doing great today, ready for a little creativity and hopefully some inspiration. This is kind of, today we're going to cover some things about machine threads. Last time I started, I guess it's 2 weeks ago, where I showed you some woodblock prints, where I took wood blocks, mostly shells and ocean life and that type of stuff, and I did some hand stitching on them. So what I want to do this time is talk to you a little bit about threads for machine, and that you can do the same thing. You know, we have some people who say, oh, I only hand stitch. Some people say, I only machine stitch. Well, you know, this system of creating a pattern and adding thread will work both ways. So everybody needs to try this. There's no excuses. We have some absolutely fabulous threads. And to be perfectly honest, this gave me a chance to try one thread that I had actually not sewn with. I know, I just broadcasted that all over. So this was really cool for me to see how it reacts, because I have my favorite threads already. Well, I just added a few more. Our brand of threads that we sell is called WonderFil. And this is a little handy brochure that we can include. They're free. You can grab it in the store when you come. If you want one, you can email us and ask us to include it in your order. But it's really very, very awesome. And you know, there's a lot of thread companies out there that are good. Their thread is good. And the reason why we support WonderFil is, first, we love the quality of it. But the most important part for me is the president of that company is heavily invested in education. He wants you to know things about thread that will help you use the thread. So heavily education oriented, and that was the signing bonus for us. So this brochure will show you all of the WonderFil threads. It talks about needle size, and it talks about what the thread is made out of and what its best uses are. So that's here. I'm going to go over a couple of them, and I will give you some information on how I did it. So I took the same woodblock prints. So you can see this is a print, and it's got a very thin stitch on it. This is with Polyfast. Now Polyfast is a polyester. It's called cottonized, and it will give you, it's not slimy. So I always think of polyester as being slimy. Maybe that's just me. So it has some texture and some grip in there, but it gives you a nice thin line, wonderful range of colors, and it's very, very strong. Now, this is not your grandma's polyester. Polyester thread, you know, there was always this wives' tale, rumor tale. Maybe it wasn't a rumor. I just never had it happen to me. But polyester is going to shred your cotton fabric. That is going to rip apart, and the thread's going to be there, and the fabric's going to rip. That is not an issue, hasn't been an issue for many, many, many years. Now, if you have old polyester thread, and it happens to be your grandmother's polyester thread, throw it out. Do not use it. So the test with old threads are if you can pull them and it snaps, you're not going to use it in your sewing machine. So that gives you 2 things. 1, go through your thread and check that it's still current, not dried out, not dry rotted. Second, you need to sew a little faster because you have more thread to go through. So thread is not precious, it's to be used. So those are a couple of hints. The other thing I want to show you is when you order thread from us, you can order in multi-packs and you can order in single colors. Well, if you're ordering single colors, I would love for you to order these thread guards. These come in packs. There's 2 different sizes. One that's more hand stitching threads. This is for the larger cones. So what this does is twofold. One, it's going to wrap around when you're done with your thread. it's going to wrap around and you're just not going to have your spool dump in your drawer. The other thing, and we'll get into this a little bit more when I talk about metallic thread, is that if you wrap it a little bit not as tightly, then it can be used for specialty threads to slow it down from coming off the cone. And rayon is notorious for that. Sometimes you need it with metallics. So it's a twofold tool. So when you're ordering thread from us, order the thread guards. They're really good. And I have that other tape, Hugo's tape or whatever. I find that even when I wash it to get the gunk off of them, it doesn't work. So I just use thread guards now. So that's definitely, anytime you're ordering thread, I recommend that you order these thread guards. So here is a relatively thin polyester thread. Now, my absolute favorite thread for machine stitching is gonna be, so here I actually have an example. This is my hand stitch sample, and this is my machine stitch sample. So this one on this side with the blue is size 12. It gives you some nice chunky, see how much different it is from a smaller thread? Look at that. Nice, bossy, chunky, bright colors, big stitch. I did everything with free motion, so it's certainly not perfect. And you can see what the difference is. So I really like 12. That for this type of work, when I'm embroidering and embellishing my pieces, I try to always go to 12. When customers come in and ask us what they want for hand stitching or big stitch quilts, size 12. That thread is so absolutely wonderful, 100% cotton, and it is great. Now, I will confess that I don't always know what size needle is in my machine. I'm working on that. We had a discussion about that at another time. So I got very frustrated. I'm using size 12 and I got it threaded in the needle, and I have normally a 40 weight in the bottom. So you don't want your thread sizes to go from 12 to 80. You want that thing to go from 12 to like 40 or 50 in here. So I was doing that and my thread was shredding. I'm like, oh, what is going on here? Well, I took out the folder and I was using a 90 needle. And when I changed the 90 needle out and I used a 100 needle, smooth as glass, no problems. So really, the needle and the thread matching up to be the right one is quite significant. And I would just keep sewing. I would just leave the same needle in and everything. Well, if you're going from size 12 and now I'm going to use a metallic spotlight, I need to change the needle again. So I've kind of had to retrain myself from just using the same needle in there. I do change it. I don't leave it in for a year, but I was not changing my needle to match my thread. So therefore, I was causing frustration for myself. And I was doing it myself. So please be, if you're not as disciplined as like me, you want to watch that. All right, so we have poly, okay, so here's some of this 12 weight. And when you're looking at the spool, it's tempting to look this way, but as you can see, we have some plastic on it, but there's not plastic on the ends, so you can get a really good idea. And this has been one of my favorite shell colors. So this is fruity color 05, and the WonderFil spools are all color coded, so we know that these purple spools are all size 12 variegated. Then the spool for 12 solid is a different color, and I think Sharon posted that in a newsletter at one time. It's really kind of helpful information. So that's one of the other things, is you want to be aware of looking at things through plastic. So we did size 12 here, and we did polyester, and then this has a little bit of both. I'm like, what did I do on this one? So you can see this is a size 50. So I use that. Then this is a size 12. So you can really Can you see the difference? Oh, Kyle, that's great. I can see the difference. That it will show you, and I mix them, as I said, I definitely mix my threads up, but you can see how much bossier that size 12 is. All right, and it will, oh, I guess this is a safe one. Not always are my backs. Some of my backs are really scary. I do get into trouble, but it is on the back, so it's okay. But you'll see it gets a lot of thread in here, and I'm 3-dimensional, it just doesn't matter. Not for what we're doing with this. It's not going to matter that it's got a little bit of bump in there. It's all good. I do not rip out. If I don't like what it looks like, I just sew more thread over it and make it look like it's on purpose. Do not unsew when I'm getting into this kind of stuff. Do not do that. You will spend hours, you know, oh, this is not perfect. Well, it's not supposed to be perfect because I'm making it. So don't unsew, don't rip out, just put more thread over it and it's gonna look great. All right, so that one is there. Let's see. Oh, here's another one that is a 50 weight. So if you can look beyond the French knots, you can see this green is a size 50 and the pink is a size 12. Well, when I finished it, it still looked really flat. It was just not interesting. So I took size 3 pearl and I did the French knots just in the little circles, and to me it looks a whole lot better. It just has some texture and some depth. So don't be afraid to add. Don't be afraid to mix hand stitching with machine stitching. Sometimes you just need that texture of that thread. I can't get a size 3 pearl through my machine. I have not investigated bobbin work. Some people who have done bobbin work can do some great stuff with decorative threads. I have not learned that yet. So this is an example of going back to the hand stitching and working with that. All right, now, okay, 2 threads that I really haven't worked with a whole lot is Spotlight, and Spotlight is a metallic. There is, and I forgot the silver spool. So you can see it's very lightweight. Again, I tend to make this stitch a little bit longer because of the fact that it's metallic. But here is the trick to using metallic. When I first became a WonderFil dealer, I went to Canada and went through training. So I was there for a week taking classes, working with the different threads. And they showed us this tool and talked a little bit about thread. I know in the bigger picture, cross wound, whatever wound, I don't know that. It doesn't affect how I sew. For some people it does. What affects how I use my thread is it on a cone or is it on a spool? So if I'm in a spool, you have 2 options. You have a spool holder that goes this way and a spool holder that goes that way. If you use a spool holder this way and put a cap on it, you are not moving your thread cone, your thing of thread. If you're like this and you put your spool this way, when you pull your thread to your machine down to your needle, you're pulling your whole thing of thread, your whole spool. So that's going to mess your tension up a little bit. So I always go here with a spool cap. Now, what do I do with these? I used to think this was only for people who had embroidery machines. That's what I thought. Well, this cone is great with these thread tamers. And, you know, I had the cheap one. I had the metal bottom. I had the loop that came up and that. I had that. When I finished that class in Canada, I threw that out. I went home and threw out all my spools of metallic thread from other manufacturers other than WonderFil. I got frustrated with them. They were sitting there. I didn't use them. They broke. They snagged. Ugh, terrible. So I threw them out. I know you're sitting there going, holy moly. She could do that. She has a whole store. This was really early on when the store was just starting. So that was my thread I had. So yes, it was kind of gutsy. So what happens is thread tamer, metallic spool. When you're sewing with metallic, you want to pull it off of your machine. Doesn't matter what machine you have, you pull it off your machine because there's a really high twist. So let's see, we'll go here, we'll go here. So we're threading it in, threading it here. And you want the thread to be above your machine. Sorry, I should have put a machine here. And then you're gonna, so your machine's gonna be here and you're gonna put it through your little loop here and then gonna go through the rest of your threading, your tension discs down to your needle. And your needle's not a size 100, I can assure you. I think I used 80, we'd have to look at what they said. All right, so why do you do this? Why do I need this thread tamer? Well, metallics are very, very high twist. So that's what causes some of the shredding, was the twists get caught up in the needle and your tension discs. So if you give metallic thread a ways to come off, then you reduce some of that high twist and you're not gonna have shredding. I don't have shredding. It's amazing. And I use Deco Bob, which is an 80 weight in the bottom, and you could use 100 and you don't really see it. And it's wonderful. This thread, it behaves so nicely. And you can use it with an embroidery machine. You can use it with free motion. You can use it with your decorative stitches. This is a thread I hadn't used in a really, really long time. And this just going through this presentation for you, in my mind as I was doing samples, I was like, oh, I need to try that again. So thank you for that. So you can see I only did little pieces of it. It's got some texture to it again. What I might do, because I'm not quite sure, you really can't see the thread too much from there. So I wonder, I might take an India ink pen and with some navy and make it a little bit darker, or I might just leave it alone. Again, I only go forward, I never go backwards. So, and usually I end up using everything on my pages. But the WonderFil Spotlight thread is really, really awesome. And the thread tamers make it so much better to use. So then this is, we take it, and I always cut, when I cut the top of thread, pull down with my foot up, and then come back. So these are these. The hardest part is always getting them started. Do we have any questions? Because I'm like talking really fast. Everybody okay? Following? Good? Following. Okay. All right. So peel this off here, and I'm wrapping it, and it's safe. Now, if I need to slow the thread down, and a lot of times rayon is really infamous for this type of stuff. So I have it, and I'm gonna do it like this. I can still use my Wonder Guard to lightly, you can see I have, it's not pulled. Oops, where am I going? Going here. All right, hello, here. So it's gonna slow down. Now I got it stuck. If you wrap it right, it will slow the thread down. And probably the best way to do it is if you threaded it through the thread tamer, then put that on. You're gonna get it right. It's gonna slow the thread coming off the spool so you don't have a thread dump. And if you've ever had one of those, you don't like them. So I think rayon is notorious for that. So let me do that. Okay. Get that. So Spotlight really is a great, great thread. And it's on the cone. And I did this, you can see this Polyfast. This is our embroidery thread that we sell, machine embroidery, but it's also on a cone. So I also use this thread tamer. Thread tamer never gets put away. All right, now, the next one that I really loved, Glamour. So we have this in a 12 thread, 12 weight and an 8 weight. So obviously the 8 weight is for bobbin thread. It's fabulous for serger. A lot of these decorative threads are wonderful with these sergers now. really, really adds some lace and looper. It's just wonderful potential. So you can see it has some shimmer. This was really easy to use. Absolutely wonderful. It's very, if you look at the texture of it, it's different from, it's got a little bit more thread than the Spotlight, but it has some glamour to it. This works in the top of your machine. Again, I would take this and use my thread tamer and pull it up and go through here and not thread it onto my machine. But this is a size 12. It is absolutely awesome. I was so excited. So this whole little coral piece is all with this glamour. Now, what I tried, and I didn't quite get finished, but you can see this is in process, is rather than, if you use a lot of heavy thread, when it's gonna buckle your fabric like this. So you can go to a Peltex, I guess is what's really easily done. And so I just traced the wood block to give me that, and I started trying to cover, and with this kind of thing, you're gonna cover the whole thing, and you can still see I have some showing. I cut board. And I used size 12, I used size 50, I used some glamour. See, you can see that little spark in there? That's glamour. And then I'm gonna stitch some more around here, and then I'm gonna cut it out, and I'll use it as my shell. It might even go here, I'm not sure. I'm not sure what's going in the middle of this page, but that might work. So I want something a little bit smaller. Maybe I should do that. But this is another way of getting really heavy thread. If you try to do this on just fabric with maybe a basic stabilizer, you'll be very frustrated. So just go straight to this because it's non-woven, you're not working with strips. All right, here is one of my seahorses. I'm gonna keep knocking this down. All right, so I used some 12 weight, and then I went back with Glamour and added some sparkle, because of course I was getting excited about using the Glamour at that point. And these are some ribbon. We have these ribbon leaves, so I'm gonna put this in here. And I couldn't decide if I was gonna stitch these pieces, but I don't think I'm going to. I think I'm just gonna leave them as part of the painted background. So that one will be embellished with some ribbon there. Okay, let me move some of this out of the way. The thread, as I said, you can buy it on the website by color, but you also can buy packs. We have Glamour packs, we have color packs that have the all kinds of different threads. This one's kind of fun because it is going to show you different threads in there. It's not going to give you all the same kind. So those are fun. Deco Bob, always have Deco Bob. Those are the 3 most popular colors to use in the bottom of your machine. That's you can certainly use it top and bottom if you want to get more texture. It's really nice. But I always use it in the bottom. I piece with it top and bottom, so that works well. All right, so then this was my fish that I'd hand stitched. So I'm like, oh, what am I gonna do for machine stitching with that? I could not think of something to differentiate them so much. So here's my machine stitched. So I took Sorry ribbon and I picked colors. This is a continuous thing. You can knit with it, crochet with it, but when I picked the colors that I wanted, so I would lay it out here, and then this is a size 12 thread in here. And I came down, and so I wanted it to be 3-dimensional. I wanted, again, to have some texture to it, but that was how I differentiated it with the machine stitching. Okay. All right, we good so far? Anybody there?
Said they're learning a lot.
Okay. All right, so there's my fish. My fish. Put that back here. All right, so what do you need to know? These are, this is the book Threads by Liz Kettle, who she used to teach classes and would teach here frequently about thread work. She gets into bobbin work. These books have been around for a really long time, but we think they're basics. We believe in them, that this is a really great place to start. Plus, Liz is my buddy. This is another one that was done that talks about fabric embellishing. So if you want to get into some of what I did with the fish, with the sari yarn, this is a great one to have too. So there's the hand stitching one by Ruth Chandler, Modern Hand Stitching, Threads, Fabric, and Beading. So if you want to get into any kind of embellishment, start with those books. They've been around for years, but they're still great books to use to start some of those things. So I would highly recommend that. We talked about the thread. You can buy it in spools or you can buy it in packs. The thread tamer comes in a box. That is an absolute must. Really, I'm all about reducing my frustration level, and I do not want to get frustrated with thread. Then we were looking at this piece here that I was talking about. So this is a hand-dyed vintage. I'm not quite sure what's going in the middle there, but if you look at this texture from our painter's threads, this would be wonderful background for any of these things you want to do. Great hand stitching material, all hand-dyed painter's threads pieces there, lots of colors, so that gives you a really wonderful texture for that. Okay, so I'm starting my book, and this is why sometimes quilting's a little difficult for me, because I don't know how to cut the same things out of the same size. So as you can see, this is my front and my fish is my back, and the back is a little bit larger than the front. So even though I cut all this stuff at the same time, it never ends up being the same size. So how I envision this is I have a front and a back. I've used the Peltex instead of batting because I'm going to put shells on so I wanted a little more strength to them to be able to hold some of the weight. So I'm going to have a back here, and I'm going to adhere my pages in. And normally I will do one page a little with much more stuff, and then I'll turn this over and I'm going to fuse something to the back of it. Not as detailed as the front, if that makes sense. All right, so it's going to go in here, and I'm going to have a back, and I'm going to sew these pages in by putting a piece of ribbon and showing to the back. So it's going to be a tall book because I really want to put my special shells in there, so I want to make sure I've built in space for those pages. So that is the beginning of that.
One question.
Yes.
When sorry, you mentioned stitch length. Do you change for each thread type?
I generally keep the manufacturer's recommended stitch length on thinner threads, but when I do go to a 12 weight or I'm going to a glamour, a decorative thread like that, I will lengthen the thread stitch, because I think if you make it too short, it's not going to show you why you're using that thread. It's not going to come up. So yes, when I do when I use a larger thread. Okay, that's a great question. Again, all these things we sit down and we automate with doing the machine when there's so much more that it can do, especially if you try a 12 weight with a decorative stitch. It's going to give you a totally different look than a 50 weight or 40 weight with a decorative stitch. It's really pretty cool to see. We have stitch outs, care of Liz, on our displays that show you some of those differences on the threads. Anything else?
What about using heavy paper rather than Timtex?
I will sew paper. One of the things you need to be careful, I think, is that if you use any kind of paper and you're doing some heavy stitching, the paper's gonna perforate and come off. Whereas Timtex is a non-woven interfacing, so it's not gonna split off. Does that make sense? Again, if I'm using paper, I'm lengthening my stitch so that I'm not perfing it as much, but that's one of the things you have to watch. Try it, see how it goes. If that's what you have, by all means try it, but that would be my initial reaction, is that you might get some perforation and it might pull the paper off. But you never know until you try it. So, any other questions? Okay, so that is for today. The next Facebook Live on Saturday is Roll Scroll, and quite honestly, unbeknownst to me, Quilting Arts has the result of their roll in their magazine there. So we challenge you to take a look at that and see, and then I'll just show you one I've got done in fabric. You absolutely can do it in paper and mixed media and combining all those things. And what do you use as the base for your scroll books? So we'll have a couple of those as well next time. By Annie's is having a competition about choosing your favorite quilt store, and they are collecting comments and recommendations. That if you, we would love your support in that. And if you have the time, for those of you who have not done it already, because I know many of you have, and I've read your fabulous comments, is that you would take the time to vote for us. I don't know what the time length on that is. I'm sure Sharon knows, and she'll put it in a month. Yeah. Okay. Did somebody else have another question?
Have you used a double-eyed needle?
You know, I haven't yet, but that is the next thing on my list. Definitely an option to do. I think that is has some wonderful opportunities for it. All right. Okay, thank you very much. Join us on Facebook. Our website is artisticartifacts.com. Sales@artisticartifacts.com if you have questions. And we will post this in YouTube, so just give us a little time for that. Thank you. Have a great creative day.